ATRT is a rare aggressive tumor in the brain and spinal cord of children. It most often affects very young children, but it can affect older children and adolescents. Unfortunately, the prognosis for children with ATRT remains unacceptably low, with the majority of children dying from their tumor or the intensive therapy that's required to treat it. The PNOC AT Working Group is a group of dedicated physicians, scientists, and parent advocates from around the world who are determined to find new therapies for ATRT. We meet regularly to hear the newest discoveries from our colleagues in the lab and to discuss how to translate their findings into the newest clinical trials and hopefully one day into the clinical care of our patients. The meetings also give us an opportunity to hear from parents in the ATRT community and to partner with them to really move the field forward.
ATRT has been a career-long interest and passion for me. We first learned about atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumor, or ATRT as it is more commonly known, in the 90s when a neuropathologist recognized that some of the cases she was examining in very young children had distinct features different from other tumor types. We also learned that patients with ATRT did quite poorly with the treatments that were being used at the time. Unfortunately, most patients died from their disease in less than a year. I worked with Children's Oncology Group colleagues to design the first cooperative group trial to treat and ideally improve outcomes for children with ATRT. We took the knowledge and therapies we had at the time, which included very intensive chemotherapy and focal radiation, to design the study ACNSO-333. The results were encouraging, as nearly half of the patients survived their cancer, but we still lost way too many children to be satisfied. Since then, other studies have yielded similar results. One of the most important things we did in ACNSO-333 was to collect patients' tumor tissue to help scientists understand what features of an individual's tumor might predict outcome. We now know that there are 3 distinct subgroups of ATRT, and some patients have a genetic condition that predisposes them to getting rhabdoid tumors. In order to understand how subgroups and other variables impact response to treatment, we really need data on many more patients than any single clinical trial to date has included.
So because ATRT is so rare and there have only been a few clinical trials specifically for children with this disease, we still have so much to learn. And the goal of the ATRT registry study is to gather as much information as possible from children around the world who were previously treated for ATRT, as well as those that are currently battling the disease. And being able to combine all of this data with other data sets out there will hopefully allow us to understand this disease better, which will in turn lead to better treatments and better outcomes.
The idea for this is keeping track of patients who are either currently diagnosed with ATRT or were diagnosed with ATRT in the past, and keeping track of how they did and what therapies they've received. Because it may be a surprise to people to know that we actually don't know how many children in the United States and in the world get ATRT every year. It's not something that's required to be reported to the governments. And so we would really like to know, and this is an opportunity for patients and families to participate in research by sharing their clinical information and also what therapies they received and what the outcomes were, so that we can get smarter about this disease and figure out what works and what doesn't in a real world setting.
One of the other main goals of the registry is to create what's called an external control cohort. So typically, in order to determine if a new therapy is effective for a particular disease, we need to conduct large randomized clinical trials with some percentage of patients being assigned to what we call the control arm. This means that those patients on the control arm will not actually get the novel therapy that we're investigating. And to do this for a rare tumor such as ATRT would take many, many years. So we're trying to be creative and innovative about how we design trials for these patients. And this is where the registry study comes into play. The registry study will allow us to gather lots and lots of very detailed information on large numbers of children with ATRT. We're going to collect tumor tissue, MRI images, and information about the patients, such as the extent of the surgery that they had, whether or not they had metastatic disease at diagnosis, how old were they when they were diagnosed, and what type of therapy they received, and ultimately whether or not that therapy was successful. We will then be able to pull groups of patients out of this database, and that data from those patients will substitute as a control arm. For example, if we were interested in studying novel therapy for children less than 3 years old with mixed subgroup ATRT, we would comb through the database, identify those patients that fit that criteria, and use their data as the control arm. And the benefit of this type of design is that it will allow us to test the efficacy of new therapies much, much faster. So we're really excited about this project, and I think it's going to be a great way for parents to contribute to eventually finding a cure for this disease.
So our goal there is to collect as many cases as we can for these ATRT patients, and including the clinical data, but also the tumor tissue as well as the blood, and to look at the germline mutations, whether it's run in families. That's what I mean by germline. So all those issues, if we can have a robust registry of patients from not just developed countries, but also low middle income countries, then we can start looking at differences in outcomes as well as genetic differences in these. And I think that would really help move the field forward significantly.
ATRT is one of the rarest pediatric brain tumors, and as such, there is very little funding directed towards ATRT research. That's why we rely on the community, especially the community of parents and friends of children with ATRT, to help us move the field forward. And I'm confident that community support is going to be what funds the research that finds a cure for this disease.
We're asking you to help fund and support the ATRT registry because we really believe that it is the next best step and thing that we can do to accelerate our understanding of this disease and, most importantly, look for cures for all patients.